Okay, everybody, I'm finally live. So here we are, and anybody who wants to drop in can do so. I'm using a Chromebook, and I've been having a difficult time getting this thing going, which is odd. You'd think a Chromebook it'd be pretty seamless, but it wanted me to download the live stream software, and I went to the Play Store and couldn't find it. Anyway, so here I am. I'll wait for folks to come in. I'll probably start with just an update about what's going on, and probably discuss my thoughts on where this is going, how it's probably going to end, what NATO should be doing, what the U.S. specifically should be doing. This is serious stuff. So to think that, we I tell you, my damn Chromebooks are not doing well. Never really liked Chromebooks anyway, so this sort of just reinforces why they're not good at, just not good devices. Google's trying to do too much. So I'll like my own video. There we go. Real slow. Is this it? I'm live now. Well, anyway, here I am. Hey. I don't know about this Poseidon nuclear drone torpedo. What is it? Is that the torpedo the Russians have talked about? That supposedly can circle the globe from any direction. Has unlimited range. Well, let me put it to you this way. The Russians talk a big game about a lot of things. The 100 megaton nuclear warhead, Tsar Bomba, tested in the early 50s, 153 maybe, detonated with a kiloton or a megaton strength of about 50 kilotons. So was probably going to be larger, but Andrei Sakharov, the physicist who built it, actually reduced the throw weight, as it's called, because he was afraid of what would happen detonating something that large in the atmosphere. But anyhow, getting back to the Poseidon nuclear torpedo, if it's the Russian one, the the Russians talk a big game about a lot of things that never come true. I mean, remember, they were going to just roll through Ukraine like it was nothing, and that's been anything but the exception, or but the experience. And they've tested a lot of in-flight nuclear weapons. What I mean is nuclear powered. They had an accident about a year and a half ago that killed several scientists, where right after it launched, it detonated, and the cruise missile hasn't been really worked on since. They haven't tested it since. So my guess is this nuclear torpedo is a lot of talk. It's not a reality. Not to say it doesn't exist. I just don't think it exists in the capacity that the Russians would have us believe. In the same way, they were going to just run over Ukraine and haven't been able to do it, and frankly won't be able to do it. So I hope that provides some context. But going back to Ukraine in particular, the war is not going the way the Russians want. It is definitely been a bigger challenge than they ever expected, and anybody else ever expected. Look, I worked this issue, and we were thinking that at best the Ukrainians could hold out for a week, 10 days. It's going to go way past that, and who knows where it's going to end up at. In the end, what I do think is going to happen is at some point, the Russians are not going to be able to advance any further. It's just going to be too tough of a slog for them. And once that happens, they'll formalize their lines. They'll declare an end to the state of Ukraine, and they will annex whatever territory they've taken to Russia. So what I find interesting and ironic, really, about Putin's reasons for going to war is this, concern about NATO being an existential threat, is he's basically got NATO countries already on his border in the Baltics, and he's moved his borders closer to NATO. So if it's an existential threat, you would want to be as far away as possible, but now he is closer than ever. So I'm just not sure he really ever thought this through. He's a completely isolated leader, and Russia is now considered an international pariah. They have been for a long time. The world's just now waking up to that fact. So also, I think what the NATO allies really need to consider is the fact that we don't need to be attacked, whether physically or cybernetically, so to speak, for us to have an Article 5 violation. If one of those nuclear reactors gets cracked open and starts spewing radiation the way Chernobyl did, that in and of itself is a threat to NATO. It may constitute an Article 5 violation. I've already written to my Congress lady about this and said, look, if this happens, it's an Article 5 violation, and the Russians need to be perfectly clear on this so that they make every effort to not damage one of those reactors and have it open up the way Chernobyl was opened. Two, at what point does what's happening in Ukraine become a threat to NATO? How many refugees can Europe absorb? 1 million? 5 million? We could very well wind up with over 5 million refugees living in Poland, Romania, Slovakia. There's one more. Oh, Romania. Oh, wait. Romania, Hungary. There you go. So thank you. I appreciate that, Texas. So the notion that we have to be attacked physically, that for us to have a threat to NATO is simply not the case. And my concern is that we haven't communicated this to the Russians effectively. Yeah, I mean, we get up to 1 million a year, right, across the Texas border. Right now, they've had 700,000 in Europe in 1 week. So clearly they're exceeding that. And our Texas border is longer than the border with Russia has with the Eastern European nations. It runs like 750 miles or something like that from the Baltic to the Black Sea. So think about that. But going back to my point is, we haven't communicated any of this to the Russians, and we've done ourselves a disservice by saying that NATO troops are not an option. We should have said, we should be saying to the Russians, look, NATO involvement is not off the table. There are limits you cannot cross that involve not attacking a NATO country. Limits below that we will view as an existential threat to NATO. And if that happens, then we're coming in. And if that happens, not only are we going to halt you, but we are rolling back those borders to pre-2014, meaning we're taking back the Crimea, we're taking back the Donbass. So, because, in the event that what I say happens, Russia takes, say, the eastern 2/5 of the Ukraine, everything from the Dnieper River east. Most of those people are going to roll out. They're going to evacuate into Western Ukraine and into Eastern Europe. It's going to be a depopulated area. Nobody's going to want to live there. That's what's happened to the Donbass, actually. So, how many refugees do there need to be in our Eastern European NATO allied nations for us to consider like, hey, this is an Article 5 crisis and it needs military response to stop the flow of refugees? We have to stop the war, basically. Maybe even take back some territory so these people can go home. So we should have made Ukraine a member right after the Crimea was annexed in 2014. We allowed a buildup for the Russians for 7 to 8 years. So yes and no. We have to have, there are certain minimum standards that we have to meet to be a NATO member, and Ukraine doesn't. Corruption is rampant within Ukraine. They were trying to fix it. They were on their way to fixing it, but it wasn't to a level where we could feel comfortable with them being a part of NATO. So, excuse me why I itch here. So what we should have been doing, and this goes all the way back to Bush the Younger, as I call him, was training the Ukrainian military in small batches, not thousands and thousands at a time, but a few thousand at a time, bringing them to the West, letting them attend our military schools, learn how to be a cohesive military, letting the Ukrainians purchase Western weapons in small quantities. So not hundreds of tanks, but maybe a few dozen. Not hundreds of aircraft, but maybe a squadron, say 12, right? Train them up so that by this year, the Russian military would have looked at Ukraine and said, you know what? It's too tough, right? They have these great weapons. They have this great training. It's just going to be too tough, too bloody, and we might actually lose. That would have been the smart way to go. Not make them a member of NATO, but integrate them in such a way that they are using NATO equipment, they're using NATO tactics, techniques, and procedures, and then they are in NATO in all but name, right? So with that being said, if we had been doing this, even going back into the Obama administration, I don't think we'd be having this war today, because it would have been too difficult for the Russians to tackle the Ukraine. They would have realized it. In fact, it's already too difficult, but they're in, and now that they're in, they can't back out. Let me read what you're saying. We did this. You watched the Ukraine parade from 2018. And they announced how many troops the West trained. With no security agreement formalized. They did. Not to the level that we thought Obama refused to sell them any offensive weapons. We gave them like blankets and first aid kits and shit like that, right? Body armor, I think. Trump came in. He said, "All right, we'll sell you javelins and not mines, but javelins and stingers." Biden came in. He gave him some more, but we didn't have the Ukrainian military training with NATO. Look, I was in Afghanistan 2014, 15, 16, and they just weren't. I mean, we had some Ukrainian soldiers there, but just a few. So, oh yeah, Obama was weak. Not weak, he was inexperienced, and he didn't take the threat seriously. So he, never did anything about it. He just thought that the problem would go away, right? Bad news doesn't get better with time, it just gets worse. And Russia was bad news. Certainly, Putin didn't respect Obama. So that's one of the reasons we're in this. He respected Trump, no doubt about that. So, I mean, it's no coincidence that he's doing this now and not 2 years ago. Excuse me. So, so today, Putin said that the economic sanctions we've leveled are tantamount to a declaration of war. And I don't think that's necessarily a bluff, but he won't act on it. The foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, said 3 weeks ago that the economic sanctions would be tantamount to severing diplomatic relations. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Russians boot out every ambassador from the NATO countries, recall all of their ambassadors. But frankly, I think we should beat them to the punch. Downgrade them from full diplomatic relations to charge d'affaires or something like that. That would be another way to really, I think, force home the fact that we're serious about this and we're still keeping options on the table to include military intervention. We need to keep it on the table. Strength is the only thing this guy respects, and we've taken strength off the table. The kind of strength he respects. He certainly doesn't respect economic strength. If he did, he would have stopped the fucking invasion already. So, yeah, so I think I am too. It would certainly be not so much a shock to our economy, but to the Europeans' economy, because they depend on oil so much. In fact, there's an article that just posted in the Washington Post, I think, that says, let me do a breakout window here. If I can do it. Yeah, I did. All right, let me make this half. Make the other one. Bring the other one over. Washington Post. So it says, oh shit, I hate fucking Chromebooks. Next time I do this, I'm using my MacBook. So much better to use, so much easier. Washington Post. I mean, this is an old Chromebook. It's over 2 years old, and it was like the least expensive model that was being sold at the time because all the good Chromebooks have been brought up because everybody was moving to online school. So it really is it really was a bad news, but yeah, it won't let me fucking. Yeah, anyway. Thank you. So, yeah, but there was an article that said that Putin was, he considers what we've done in economic war, or tantamount to declaration of war, and that it may be too late for Europe to wean itself from Russian oil and natural gas. Trump warned them about this. He warned them, and they didn't listen, and they're paying for it now. My concern is that since they have an issue, it's more than an issue, since this is a crisis for them, that they're eventually going to figure out a way to forgive Russia and basically try to integrate them back into the international system. That would be a huge catastrophe, and we should fight against it. We've removed most Russian banks from SWIFT. The only ones we haven't removed are the ones that deal in oil, that receive and make payments for oil. And there's a reason for that. It's so the Russians can keep buying and selling oil. If we were to do that, though, remove them from that SWIFT system, it would be a tantamount to an oil embargo. They wouldn't be able to buy and sell oil on the international market anymore. So, but before we do that, I think we need to really consider the prospect that by doing that, removing them from SWIFT entirely, basically embargoing their oil, we could plunge the entire world into fucking an economic crisis. I'm not sure. Does anybody have the stomach on the East Coast for paying, $8 a gallon for regular, 12 for super? I don't know. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that banning Russian oil imports would really begin an immediate reevaluation by the Russians of what they're doing. However, it might push them into crisis mode themselves. They're already in crisis mode, but push them into a state of mind that they need to lash out. So, we have to weigh these options very carefully. Yeah, he's right. They have to write physical checks, right? Just like we used to do in the 80s and 90s, right? You got your checkbook out and you write a physical check. So thank you all to keep him in mind. So thanks, bud. I was talking to my son. He just shut the door for me. So, all right, man. Looks like it's just you and I in here. I'm going to cut this off at 30 minutes. I was going to go initially for an hour, but I figured I'll do a better job next time now that I've figured out how to go live. So what else? What else should we discuss? Let me talk about Putin real quick. You too, bud. So Putin, people say is irrational. He's rational in a sense that he views things from a worldview where he's at the center of it. When you watch him closely and how he rules Russia, it's like he is Russia. And I think in his mind, he views Russia and himself as one and the same. Russia has been around for a long time. They've suffered countless invasions and massacres, and they're still going. So NATO is not an existential threat to Russia. Ukraine certainly isn't, but it is an existential threat to Putin. Having a democratic country on your borders that's relatively, or where corruption is relatively low or even perhaps non-existent, where the elections are regular, fair, and free, that's a threat to him because Russians will look at it themselves and say, hey, what against him? So he views what Ukraine's, what Ukraine stands for, what NATO stands for, what the West stands for as a threat to him. Therefore, since he and Russia are one of the same, it's an existential threat to Russia. So that's where this existential threat comes from. Otherwise, there isn't one. NATO would never attack Russia in an aggressive fashion in order to try and eliminate Russia. Just wouldn't happen. It's impossible. Napoleon couldn't do it. The Germans couldn't do it. If they can't do it, nobody can do it. Yeah, I would agree with what you just said. He is isolated. He's got a lot of sycophants around him. Yeah, and the Russians, have a history of this, and he knows that. So he wants to avoid that. That's why they're restricting press, cracking down on demonstrators. He does not want a protest movement to take fire in his country. Because once the military sees that he's losing control of the people, yeah, absolutely. That's what he fears. I mean, think about it like this. Up until 2014, all he did was bitch and complain. Never really took any kind of aggressive action. But once the Ukrainians overthrew the puppet government, the Russian puppet government, that's when he took action. It was. Yep, it was. He feels that we were actually on our way to trying to overthrow him, that we had a hand in overthrowing the Russian puppet government in 2014 that was in Ukraine, and that was our first step, pardon me, in overthrowing him. So that's why he invaded Donbass, conquered the Crimea, annexed them, and now this is why he's invading Ukraine. Because I think he can read the tea leaves and know that he may as well do this while Biden's in office, because he felt he didn't have any respect for Biden. He felt Biden was a pushover. The NATO alliance was fractured. So do it now until before 2024, 25, when a Republican comes back into office, or somebody who's going to be much firmer, and then his opportunity's wasted. So we're gone. So do I know you? I'm just curious. I do know you. Okay, I just wondering. I don't know your name. I can't recognize your handle, whatever you. Oh, okay. We don't know one another. All right. Funny. Let me check my phone real quick. See what women are texting me. All right, I've had enough of that. Prepaid phone, my ass. You can always tell a fucking scammer because they say they use a prepaid phone. So I got to go on to Match and hello, Christy. Do my boost again. All right, well, I think I'm going to end it, and I'm going to try and do this again maybe later this week, Wednesday or Thursday. Go back to work tonight, tomorrow night, Tuesday night, and then I'm off Wednesday and Thursday. So, yeah, thanks for stopping in. I also do 3-minute videos on TikTok, Cool Breeze 0469, and so you can always follow me there. And appreciate you coming in, and follow my streams. I want to be a YouTube monetizer, so I don't have to work that hard. The older I get, the less I want to work. All right, you take care, buddy. Appreciate it.